Imagine finding out your favorite political commentator might actually be a paid spokesperson for a foreign government.
Yeah, I mean, that completely shatters the illusion, right? You tune in believing you're listening to this fiercely independent voice, someone fighting for your values, and then you discover someone else might actually be holding the pen.
Exactly. And a massive civil war is brewing in conservative media right now over this exact concept.
Hmm.
So a right-wing political podcast hosted by Brian Maxwell recently dropped this absolute bombshell video.
Right, and he goes after two of the absolute biggest conservative influencers in the world, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens.
Yeah, he accuses them of selling out. The source claims these commentators completely flipped their political scripts because massive amounts of foreign money, specifically from Qatar, essentially bought their loyalty.
It's intense. The video paints this picture of like deep betrayal, hidden funding, and this really calculated effort to manipulate millions of voters.
All right, so our mission in this deep dive is to impartially unpack these explosive claims. We're going to follow the alleged money trail, look at the statistics the source provides, and examine the underlying mechanics of how modern influence campaigns actually operate.
Because we're not taking sides here. We're simply exploring the anatomy of the argument the source laid out just to understand why it's causing such an earthquake in the media landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really need to start with the most prominent target in the report, which is Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, so the focus on Carlson centers entirely on this perceived radical shift in his worldview. Because for years, he built this brand as the ultimate America First voice. And the source points out that a major pillar of his commentary used to be this staunch, incredibly pro-Israel stance. I mean, he frequently called Jerusalem his favorite city in the world.
Yeah, he spoke openly about taking his family there on regular vacations, right? Praising their infrastructure, their agriculture, their entire society.
Exactly. The video actually labels him Israel's greatest travel salesman, just to emphasize how dedicated he was to that specific talking point.
But the contrast the source draws now is pretty sharp, right?
Oh, it's night and day. Today, the video alleges Carlson aggressively downplays the threat of terrorist groups in the Middle East. They play this recent clip where Carlson openly mocks the concept of Islamic jihad.
Wait, he mocks it.
Yeah, he literally waves his hand and says the phrase Islamic jihad, whatever that is. He frames it as though it's just some manufactured panic.
Wow.
And the source highlights that he takes a similar dismissive tone with groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, treating them like they aren't real threats to the West.
So when a media figure makes a massive pivot like that, going from a passionate supporter of a nation to just casually brushing off the groups that attack it, people naturally ask why. And the source claims they found the answer by looking at his bank accounts.
Right, and that brings us to the $15 million question.
Unpack that. $15 million.
Yeah. According to the video, when Carlson launched his new independent media network on X, formerly Twitter, that venture received a massive $15 million injection of seed capital.
Okay.
And that money came from an investment firm called 1789 Capital, which is managed by a financier named Omid Malik.
But $15 million is serious capital to launch a network. But we need to explain how a U.S. venture capital firm connects back to the Middle East.
Well, the link the source makes is through what's called a sovereign wealth fund.
Right, which is basically a gigantic pool of surplus money, usually from oil and gas revenues, owned entirely by a country's government.
Exactly. They take this national savings account and invest it globally to generate returns. And the source alleges that the Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund is a major investor backing 1789 Capital.
So, on paper, Carlson can honestly say, I don't take a dime from the government of Qatar, because the check he receives literally says 1789 Capital.
Right, but the source argues the money is just flowing through a financial middleman. The government funds the venture capital firm, and the VC firm funds the podcaster.
So the mechanism of influence is what they're really attacking here. They argue that foreign influence doesn't look like a spy with a briefcase full of cash in a parking garage anymore.
No, not at all. It looks like a completely legitimate business investment. What's fascinating here is how the source completely rejects the idea of coincidence.
How so?
They look at the timeline. You have the launch of the network, this $15 million investment tied to a Qatari fund, and then a sudden, dramatic change in rhetoric regarding the Middle East. To the speaker in the video, the proximity of those events is the smoking gun.
Right, but I have to push back a little here. Assuming a venture capital investment dictates a host's editorial policy is kind of like assuming the bank that gave you a mortgage gets to tell you what color to paint your living room.
That's a fair point.
I mean, there's obviously a financial link, but Does that automatically equal creative control? Venture capital firms usually care about return on investment, not, micromanaging a podcast script.
Sure, but the source doesn't just rely on the venture capital angle. They also bring a public relations firm into the mix to bolster the argument.
Oh, right. Luminate Advisors. The video claims this is a high-end media consulting group that receives a staggering $180,000 every single month from the Qatari Embassy.
A month, yeah. A retainer of 180 grand a month is massive.
And we should clarify how foreign media lobbying actually works. PR firms at that level aren't just buying billboard space. They're buying access. They build relationships with producers, they pitch specific narratives, and offer exclusive opportunities.
Which perfectly sets up the source's next piece of evidence. The video claims that Luminate Advisors used their influence to orchestrate a highly publicized interview back in March between Tucker Carlson and the Qatari Prime Minister.
Right. And the source argues, Carlson sat down and uncritically praised a regime with a well-documented history of severe human rights abuses.
Exactly. And they allege she only did it because this highly paid PR firm facilitated the entire event to sanitize the nation's image.
The source even mentions someone from the Qatar National Democrat Party, claiming they've been actively investigating Carlson's finances for months. They're promising that this whole financial web will be made public soon. They're building a heavy circumstantial case here.
They really are. They're layering these mechanisms of influence, the VC backing on one side and the coordinated PR push on the other.
I see the logic they're constructing, but I just keep coming back to the core assumption. Does a shift in a media personality's talking points automatically prove they're a paid asset? I mean, people's political views evolve constantly based on world events or just a change in personal philosophy.
Well, the source dismisses the idea of a natural evolution. For them, the suddenness of the shift, combined with those financial data points, paints a picture of a captured asset rather than someone just changing their mind.
So they paint Carlson's situation as this shadowy, backroom financial web. But what's really interesting is that their second target, Candace Owens, is accused of doing the exact same thing, but completely out in broad daylight.
Yeah, the contrast in how the source views the two situations is really striking. Carlson is framed as part of this hidden structure, but the source describes Owens as just a blatant opportunist.
They actually call her a puppet, right?
They do. A puppet who will actively betray her own political movement just to secure a lucrative sponsorship.
To build this case, the video breaks her career down into three distinct phases. Phase 1, according to the video, is that she actually began her public life leaning toward the political left.
Yeah, the source claims she tried to adopt this Ivy League elitist persona to fit in with liberal media circles. But the video argues the left ultimately rejected her. They claim she was shunned because she was too well-spoken and because of her skin color.
Which leads directly to Phase 2. After that rejection, she makes a massive pivot to the political right. She brands herself as a fierce, pro-Trump, America First advocate.
Right, and she builds a huge audience. Millions of conservative voters begin trusting her.
But the source argues we are currently living in Phase 3 of her career. They allege she has suddenly flipped again.
Yes. Instead of championing the America First movement, the video accuses her of becoming an agitator whose primary goal is to fracture and split the MGA voting base.
They specifically call her out for teaming up with figures like Thomas Massie. The source brands Massie as a traitor to the America First movement, so by associating with him, they argue Owens is actively working to tear down the conservative coalition from the inside.
And just like with Carlson, the video points the finger straight at foreign money to explain why she entered this third phase. But, instead of digging through venture capital records, they just play a clip from her own broadcast.
Oh man, the audio clip. They use this specific piece of audio where Owens openly discusses Qatari funding. She explicitly tells her audience that she's not currently funded by Qatar.
Right. But then she looks right at the camera and says, "I'm trying to be." She literally says, "If you're watching, please, I have no issues."
She goes even further than that. She states that if they approach her with $3 million, she would happily read advertisements for Qatar on her show.
Yeah, she jokes about not knowing what properties Qatar owns in London, but enthusiastically mentions she'd love to stay at one of their luxury hotels.
Okay, but again, pushback time. If someone is openly joking on a podcast about wanting a massive payday to read an ad, does that truly count as a secret foreign influence operation?
I mean, that's a debate, right?
Because to me, it just sounds like a controversial podcaster doing what controversial podcasters do, trying to secure a loud, attention-grabbing sponsorship. Podcasters read ads for sketchy dietary supplements and foreign corporations all the time.
Well, the mechanism of influence is different, but the source argues the result is exactly the same.
It just feels like the source is conflating a provocative joke about securing a bag of cash with actual geopolitical treason.
You really have to view it through the psychological lens of the source. The modern political influence campaign doesn't always try to buy the politician anymore. It buys the podcaster.
Because of the trust.
Exactly. Parasocial trust is the most valuable currency in politics today. Listeners develop these deep, personal bonds with these hosts.
Yeah, you feel like you know them. You trust them way more than traditional news anchors.
Right. And the source views the America First movement as this sacred duty to protect the nation. So hearing a trusted leader in that movement eagerly beg a foreign government for $3 million, even if it's delivered as a joke, it's viewed as a profound betrayal.
To the source, the joke itself is the proof that she's compromised.
Yeah, it signals that her loyalty isn't to the movement, but to the highest bidder.
So we spent the first half of this deep dive focused on the individual podcasters.
Yeah.
But zooming out, why does this specific source care so deeply about the podcast sponsorship market?
It's because there's a much larger, almost existential fear driving this entire video.
Right, the video is absolutely not just a critique of two podcasters making questionable financial deals. The source believes this media manipulation is just one piece of a massive global takeover.
And that's a massive escalation, right? Going from a debate over PR firms to a global takeover. But they attempt to ground this grand theory in government data.
Specifically, Department of Justice records. The video cites FARA filings supposedly exposed by the Washington Examiner.
Right, FARA being the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So anyone lobbying on behalf of a foreign government in the U.S. has to publicly register and disclose their activities.
And these filings track how often foreign agents communicate with media outlets. According to the stats cited by the source, between January 1st, 2024 and Election Day, only about 10% of the recorded communications from Qatari foreign agents were directed at conservative media.
Just 10%.
Yeah, so for the majority of the year, foreign lobbyists were largely ignoring right-wing media.
But the source claims that immediately after Republicans gained control, that communication statistics shifted violently. Suddenly, more than 50% of the recorded communications from Qatari agents were targeting conservative media.
Jumping from 10 to over 50% is a huge pivot. And these agents aren't just sending spam emails. They're pitching stories, offering exclusive interviews, providing pre-written op-eds.
Exactly. The source claims this data proves a deliberate, calculated effort to buy right-wing influence. They argue Qatar saw the political winds change, realized who was holding the levers of power, and immediately deployed millions to shape the conservative narrative.
To sanitize their global reputation, using the commentators voters trust most. But honestly, a foreign country heavily lobbying the political party in power makes logical sense. That's standard operating procedure in Washington.
It is, but if we connect this to the bigger picture the video paints, the source believes this lobbying effort is actually part of a blueprint to overthrow Western civilization entirely.
Overthrow civilization.
Yeah. The video features a clip of a military official, Colonel West, who outlines this framework he calls the 4 stages of Islamic subjugation.
And the source treats this 4-stage military theory as an absolute prophecy. Stage 1 is migration. The official claims the strategy begins by simply moving large populations of people into a target country.
Which leads to stage 2, population, growing those numbers rapidly from the inside once they're settled.
And once you do that, the natural next step is social friction. Stage 3, agitation.
And agitation is where the media influence we've been discussing becomes the primary weapon. The source believes they start pushing to change local laws, demanding structural accommodations, and most importantly, using captured media influencers to normalize their ideas.
They use the media to soften the ground for stage 4.
Right. Domination. Replacing the target country's legal systems with strict Sharia law. And the source warns their audience that this isn't theoretical. They point to countries like the UK and claim they are already nearing the final stages of this takeover right now.
They literally state that the UK has effectively fallen. But they don't stop there. They fold in these historical conspiracy theories to give this modern anxiety a sense of ancient inevitability.
Yeah, they reference a book by a 19th century figure named Albert Pike.
Albert Pike, right. He was a 19th century Freemason. And for decades, conspiracy theories have claimed he wrote a letter predicting 3 distinct world wars.
It's a classic tactic. When people feel anxious about modern political chaos, they recycle old occult frameworks and just tape current events onto them. The source uses Pike to claim this final world war will be a massive clash between Islam and the West, sparking a global apocalypse.
The leap in logic here is truly breathtaking. We started looking at a debate over podcast sponsorships, and the source escalated it straight to a 19th century prophecy of a global apocalypse. It's like finding a leaky pipe in your basement and immediately concluding a shadowy cabal is sinking your entire city into the ocean.
It is an astronomical leap. But for the creator of this video, the leaky pipe is never just a leak. It's absolute proof the foundation was sabotaged. When an audience believes they're fighting an existential war for survival, every single data point gets absorbed into that grand theory.
So a podcast interview isn't just an interview, it's psychological warfare. A venture capital investment is a foreign bribe. A joke about an ad read is outright treason.
Precisely. They view Carlson and Owens not as entrepreneurs, but as high-value military targets successfully captured by the enemy.
And that narrative is profoundly terrifying if a listener actually buys into it. They're essentially being told you can no longer trust the watchdogs.
That perceived betrayal is the engine driving the anger in this video. The source feels abandoned by the figures who were supposed to guard the gates of the conservative movement.
Well, we have mapped out a massive amount of territory today. According to the claims in this specific video, the conservative media landscape is tearing itself apart in a civil war, with top voices accused of abandoning their principles for Middle Eastern funding.
Through backdoor VC funding or blatant open sponsorships.
And tying it all into a grand theory of cultural takeover.
This deep dive serves as a stark reminder of how complex the modern information war is. And examining these claims leaves you with a very unsettling question. If foreign nations are legally allowed to hire high-priced PR firms to lobby our media behind the scenes, how many of the fierce political opinions we hold today are actually our own organically formed thoughts?
Yeah.
And how many are simply the result of a highly successful, completely invisible marketing campaign designed by someone we will never even see?
That is a thought that will definitely keep you up at night, questioning the origin of everything you hear. Our goal today wasn't to play judge and jury, but to shine a light on the mechanics of these explosive claims. Keep digging into the sources and always keep questioning what you hear.